Okay, Councilor Dice,
Present.
Councilor Booker,
Present.
okay, President Pro Tem Natatis,
Present.
Councilor Burke,
Present.
okay, Councilor Goodwin.
Present.
Thank you, and myself as President Dominguez, I'm present. Good evening to everyone. Welcome to this evening's special council meeting. You are hereby given notice the Council of the City of New London will hold a special meeting called by the President of the City Council pursuant to Section 22 of the City Charter. Due to the ongoing national and state public health emergency caused by the global coronavirus pandemic, City of New London public meetings will be held virtually. Meeting agendas can be found at www.newlondonct.org. An audio recording of this meeting will be posted on the city website within 7 days of the meeting. So again, once again, I want to welcome the mayor, Mayor Passero, and all department heads that are here, and also especially many of our New London residents who are watching at this time. At this moment, I'm going to do the prayer and pledge, and then after that, I will pass it on to Mayor Michael Passero. All right. Father God, I thank you this evening for allowing us to come once again together for such an important moment in our history. And I pray, Lord, that you will continue to bless this city. I know that you have a plan for New London, not just any kind of plan. You have a good plan to help it prosper it, and not only to help it prosper, but also to make sure that everything we do is in equity and that it will benefit the residents of our city and even those that will come in the future to live in this city. I pray not only that your hand and your blessing may be upon our mayor, Michael Passero, and upon his administration, and also we as city councilors to continue to lead this city forward. And also pray for each of the residents that we may continue to collaborate to move our city forward. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Amen. So the purpose of this meeting is the submission of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021, 2022, and also the annual statement of finances and general conditions of the affairs of the city of New London. And without further ado, I will.
President Dominguez.
Yes, sir.
This is Councilor John Sadi. Are we going to say the pledge today?
Oh, thank you, Councilor Sadi. Yes, we will. All right. Go ahead, Councilor Sadi. Go ahead and do the pledge. Do it in Spanish.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to which it stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Prometo lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América, a la república que representa una nación ante Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. This is President Dominguez. Thank you, Councilor Sadi, for that reminder. And at this time, then I will, without further ado, I will pass it on to Mayor Michael Passero.
Good evening, President Dominguez and members of the City Council. I am pleased to present to you the proposed budget for the 2021 to 2022 fiscal year. 1 year ago, when I proposed the current fiscal year's budget, the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic was just setting in. I'm pleased to report that despite the challenges and extraordinary expenses of the pandemic, the city's financial position is strong. We have carefully and conservatively managed the emergency aid that has been provided to mitigate both the city's lost revenue and to cover the increase in spending due to the public health emergency. I'm sure that I do not have to describe for anyone in our city the remarkable hardship that we have all endured these past 12 months. All of our lives were utterly disrupted, including our home life, dealing with childcare and school schedules, juggling new employment routines, or the challenge of sudden unemployment and extreme financial stresses. People are suffering from the effects of isolation, food insecurity, For some, the physical agony from contracting the virus, and for others, sorrow for the loss, excuse me, sorrow for the loss of loved ones who did not survive. These new realities we know too well. What we should also recognize is the historic response of fellow Whalers and our city staff who mobilized to confront the havoc wrought upon our city by the virus. Almost overnight, our neighbors, civic organizations, and nonprofits mobilized to help distribute food and PPE, help families with childcare and homeschooling, and to volunteer at testing and vaccination clinics. Our city workforce willingly accepted their role as essential employees and stepped up to meet the new duties imposed upon them by the pandemic. Each of our city departments continued to fulfill their traditional mission while taking on the additional responsibilities thrust upon them by the pandemic. We should all be enormously proud of our community's response in this time of emergency and of the incredible contribution and sacrifice of our city workforce. While we are far from overcoming the challenges of this pandemic, I am confident that we have the will and the determination to come out of this stronger and more resilient than ever. My goal in preparing a budget for the next fiscal year was to continue to build on the financial growth and stability that the city has incrementally achieved with each of the previous 5 operating budgets that I have presented to the City Council. Once again, this budget is able to lower the mill rate, albeit very modestly at this time, and to increase our fund balance. We are fully funding the actuarially determined employer contribution, also known as ADEC, for our pension obligations, and the proposed budget also allows us to begin funding our other post-employment benefit liability, also known as OPEB. This type of responsible budgeting gives me the hope and expectation that the budget I am proposing for fiscal year 22 will continue to build confidence in the city's financial position as we aggressively promote our city, attract development and investment, and increase our bond rating. This proposed budget continues the goal established when I took office in 2015 of increasing revenue while lowering the property tax burden. We are able to achieve this goal by encouraging investment in our city. For example, the infamous Parcel J at the corner of Bank Street and Howard Street, vacant since urban renewal in the 1970s, has been transformed into 137 units of new housing, and it's poised to begin leasing early this summer. Another 200 units of new housing will break ground on Howard Street within a quarter mile of the EB design facility and a short walk to our historic downtown. Also, the site plan for the completion of the long stalled out Shores Landing complex in the heart of our downtown was approved late last winter. These are just a few of the many development projects that are growing our grand list and redirecting our city's destiny toward an economically vibrant urban hub for southeastern Connecticut. The city's improving financial condition provides opportunities and tangible benefits that are more than the numbers on the spreadsheets that Finance Director McBride is about to show you. New London's responsible budgeting over the past 6 years is permitting us to invest in ourselves. We are continuing our commitment to new schools and the transition to an all-magnet school district that delivers a first-rate education for our children. We are improving our parks, our roads, and our
I go to
sidewalks.
Ledger, but I live in London. They see a lot. They have.
Excuse me, there is no interruptions right now?
To improving our parks, our roads, and our sidewalks, and to are unrivaled public safety agencies. We are designing and marking out bike routes throughout the city, and we are finalizing plans to roll out a new microtransit bus service in partnership with Southeast Area Transit. We are uncovering a long neglected piece of our heritage with a new Black History Trail, and we are building on our arts and culture economy by establishing a designated cultural district. After decades of unfulfilled expectations, we are on the verge of breaking ground on the long-held dream of building a community recreation center. This proposed budget continues to strengthen the city's economic base, creating job opportunities for our residents and providing the resources we need to build a city that reflects the values and delivers on the priorities of our residents. Our recent economic growth has provided the opportunity to fund new initiatives in this budget directed at the priorities that have come to the forefront during the remarkable events of the past year. We have recognized racism as a public health emergency, and we have adopted the recommendations of the Public Safety Policy Review Committee to improve the relationship between our police department and the community. This proposed FY22 budget includes funding to meet the aspirations of our community for police reform and creating a truly anti-racist city. The first of these new initiatives is to fund an office exclusively dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The work of dismantling inherently racist social systems requires our full focus and attention. We must begin to invest in resources necessary to unwind the generational consequences of systemic racism, including disparate outcomes in many areas of life based on race, like home ownership, employment opportunities, career advancement, criminal justice, and health and mortality. Our city will never achieve its full potential until all of our neighbors have an equal opportunity to contribute their talent and share in our prosperity. The second new initiative is to fund an innovative program coordinated by our Human Services Department that will seek to better utilize mental health professionals and other community resources to reduce the need for police involvement in low-level nonviolent incidents that arise principally from mental health emergencies. Recognizing that 40% of our emergency calls for police services are mental health related, our goal is to develop effective connections to more appropriate services and to de-escalate behaviors before the criminal justice system has to be engaged. Finally, before I turn this over to Finance Director McBride, who will review the budget detail with you this evening, I want to emphasize the most important component of this budget. This budget does not burden our families with an increase in their property taxes. We live under a tax system that is inherently unfair and regressive. The median household income in New London is $40,000. For our Black families, it's $33,000. For our Hispanic families, it's $27,000. Under the regressive property tax system, the lower a family's income, the greater percentage of that income goes toward paying property taxes. Our families pay between 15 and 18% of their income to meet their tax obligations. I am absolutely committed to minimizing as much as possible the inherent inequity of the tax system on the families in our city. While our city's annual budget cannot single-handedly fix the income and wealth inequity that is systemic in our state, we can stop compounding the problem by continuing to alleviate the property tax burden on our residents. This budget continues the trend of easing that burden. I thank you for the opportunity to deliver these remarks tonight. The Finance Department has prepared a line item budget book, which each of you should have already received, and we'll be publishing that budget on the website either this evening or by tomorrow morning. I look forward to working with you over the next 8 weeks toward the adoption of the city's annual appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2022. Finance Director McBride will now present an overview of the details of the proposed budget. Thank you.
Good evening, councilors. I'm going to share my screen. Is that visible? Yes, okay,
Yes.
Yes, it is.
thank you. Good evening. My name is David McBride. As the Director of Finance, I have the privilege of presenting to you this evening the mayor's fiscal 2022 budget, along with some additional financial information relating to the city's financial position. Before I begin, however, I would like to have a special thanks to all the department heads who have met with me and the other individuals in the finance department and to put together and develop a New London City budget, which, although it is bare bones, provides the departments with the necessary financial amounts in order to achieve their department objectives. I also want to give a real special thanks to the finance department for their assistance in putting together this budget presentation, the budget books, and all the pertinent details that go into it. Special thanks goes out to Deputy Director Donna Reinhardt and Financial Assistant Isis Davila for their dedication and commitment and their hard work at assisting my efforts. And one last note, I would like to inform everyone that you have been hearing a lot about the Munis implementation. We, over the last month or so, have ran parallel with Munis and the Excel budgeting that we did last year, and happy to report that we have uploaded everything into Munis, and this budget will be rolled out in the Munis Enterprise Reporting System, which is a tremendous feat, and it should assist future budgets and financial presentations in the future. First item is an agenda. Brief agenda for tonight's presentation is as follows. I'll first review the historical financial performance of the city. I'll discuss the revenues and expenses from fiscal 2013 through fiscal 2020. I'll also discuss the fund balance of the city, which really shows the strength in the overall financial position of the city from fiscal 2013 through 2020. Then I'll provide a summarized fiscal 22 mayor's recommended budget. I will then go into some high-level revenues. I will discuss the revenue sources so everyone has a familiarity and aware of how the city generates all of its revenues. I'll discuss the New London grand list growth over the past 7 years. I'll touch upon and show a slide on the municipal grand list growth of New London, as well as some of the other local municipalities for a comparison. I'll then spend some time going over the expenditures. First and foremost, I will discuss the city departmental budgets, comparison of fiscal 21 and 22. And this will be a summary of the year-over-year changes in the budget request by each department of the city. I will then discuss the Board of Education mayor's recommended budget and slide showing the mayor's recommendation for the Board of Ed budget and an explanation as to how that was developed. I will conclude with the mill rate calculation and the proposed mill rate for next year. This calculation provides all the explanations as to how the mill rate will be determined if the mayor's recommended budget is adopted. This slide is the revenue, and it shows the revenue and expenditure growth from fiscal 2013 through fiscal 2020. And it's a great indicator to show how the city has been performing financially. As you can see, the city's revenues have been increasing at an annual growth rate of 2.4% year over year. The city's controllable expenses, including all of the city departments, including the Board of Ed, as well as other costs such as workers' comp, liability, auto, and property insurance, as well as some other matters, have only increased 1.6%. The result of this year-over-year revenues in excess of expenses results in a more favorable financial position for the city, and that obviously has some positive impacts on the fund balance. This slide, which I've shown in past presentations, summarizes the city's fund balance and how it has evolved over the past 6 years. For those who are not aware, the fund balance is in effect a municipality's rainy day fund or savings account, which is the predominant industry used matter to determine the financial position of a municipality. Good accounting practice states that the fund balance should be at least 15% of a city's budget, And as you may recall, in fiscal 2017, the council enacted a fund balance policy, which required the city's fund balance to increase 1% a year, starting in 2018, with the goal of achieving 16.67% in fiscal 2024. As you can see, the city has made tremendous strides over the years from the fiscal 2013, 2014 on to where we are today in 2020. Remarkable growth here, as you can see. The fiscal 2020 numbers, as you can see here, are still unaudited. We expect to have the audit done in the next few weeks, but these are pretty solid estimates as to where we stand today. One thing to note, in fiscal 2020, after the conclusion of the fiscal 2019 audit, the audit showed that we had an excess 6% fund balance growth of over 5.4 million. As a result of that, we transferred 1.8 million from fund balance into setting up a capital reserve account, which was this 1.8 million, in order to fund the capital purchases in the future and to not impact the operational expenses and the mill rate in future years. So that's a little change in what you'll see this year. And that 1.8 is what you're seeing here on top of the fund balance. I do want to note, however, in fiscal 2020, we did have some struggles as the financial impact of COVID impacted 4 months of the year. And you'll see a downturn here in the fund balance. We only added 460,000 to the city's coffers. We did receive some COVID relief that year, but it was only approximately $240,000. And that number was not sufficient to cover the lost revenues and the increased expenses. And that's why you see this growth, which pales into comparison to where we've been in the past. As you probably are aware, recent legislation has provided additional funds to offset COVID-related expenses and also may be used to offset decreases in anticipated revenue streams. These measures will certainly help out this current fiscal year 2021 and future fiscal years as well, as it's intended from what we're hearing is to carry for 4 years. With all that being said, however, I do want to emphasize as of 6/30/20, the fund balance growth is still 13.7, or the fund balance amount is 13.7, which represents a 14.5% fund balance policy, which is 3 million over our set target goal. So we are in a very strong financial position. We hope that this continued strong financial position will lead to a bond rating upgrade next year, which should result in decreased interest costs. And as you are all aware, with the ongoing projects at the 2 schools, those decreased interest rates should have a material impact on the city's financials and for the future years to come. The mayor's fiscal 2022 summarized budget is 96,298,123. This number represents a 1.9% increase from the fiscal 2021 budget. The major categories of the revenues and expense accounts are listed below, all of which will go into greater detail into some future slides. What's probably most important in this summary slide to realize is that 60% of our revenues are used to provide for the city expenditures are from taxes, that being real estate, motor vehicles, and personal property taxes. On the expenditure side, you can see that the first 3 components, city-related expenditures, total 39.9 million, which represents 42% of the entire budget. Debt service for the city and the Board of Ed schools represents 7% of the budget. And the Board of Ed departmental budget of 44.5 represents the greatest percentage of the budget at 46%. Other expenditures of 5 million represent 5%, and they include retirement payments, pension costs, workers' comp, liability, auto, and funding for OPEB and other costs. I'll now touch upon some details on the revenues. This slide, which I think you've seen in the past, really tries to provide some detail as to the revenues of the city and how it funds its expenditures. As I mentioned earlier, taxes are the largest component. These 3 areas here, they represent, or actually 4 areas, they represent 60% of the budget: real estate, personal property, motor vehicle, and other taxes. Another large component is the intergovernmental revenues of 31.3. The primary number in that category is the ECS payments of the 22.4, which, as you know, goes directly to the schools to assist with some of their finances. Also in this number is pilot revenue of 4.6 million, the casino fund of 1.7 million, and the Muni Stabilization Fund of 1.1 million. Charges for services is your next great area of revenue, 4 million. That consists of ambulatory revenue of 1.8 million, private haulers revenue of 550,000, conveyance tax of 450,000, and some amounts paid from the water, WPCA, stormwater, and parking authority for charges for services for providing services to those enterprise funds. Permits and licenses of 832. That figure has increased over the past few years as a result of the economic development that has occurred in the city. We hope to see this number and drive that forward in future years as well. Police private protection of 600,000. This number has grown slightly over the past few years, and this number represents revenues received from providing police officers and functions at various construction-related facilities or other events where police services are needed. This is a revenue generator for the city. Fines and penalties, 516,000. This is mainly delinquent taxes that are paid in subsequent years. Some other revenue of 762,000, consisting of vital revenue from vitals, such as hospital matters, and interest income of 300,000. The next slide I'd like to show is this slide, which shows the New London grand list growth. This shows how the growth has occurred over the last 6 years. As you can see, the growth has been very steady, and there has never been a decrease in the grand list. This slide's extremely important, and the result of this contributes to additional revenue stream that the city can use to fund its operations, programs, and initiatives. To better understand the importance of this growth, please note the increase in the last year from the 1.492 to the 1.512. This amount of 20.7 million growth, which was the 1.39% grand list growth that was publicized recently. If you assume the 20.7 million at the 38.19 grand list rate, and you assume a 98 to 99 tax collection of that amount, you'll see that results in additional revenue to the city of 700,000, a little bit over $700,000. And the reason that's important is because that $700,000, as you'll see in future slides, is not completely sufficient to fund the increases in the city and the Board of Ed's budget. So as a result, it's critical we continue to increase the grand list, because that growth will provide direct revenue streams that we can use to fund further operations in the city and the Board of Ed. With that being said, however, I don't want to minimize the 3.2% because that is a solid number. We just would like to have that grow in the future. To see how that 3.2% growth compares to some of the other municipalities, there's a slide that we have shown in the past as well. As you can see, New London's growth of 3.2% has been growing much faster than some of the other local municipalities. In fact, it almost totals the sum of the average annual growth of the municipality. So remarkable growth over the past 7 years, but still striving to increase that further to provide some additional revenue streams for the city. Next, we'll discuss some expenditures. This slide provides some of the details regarding the changes in the city's general fund budgets from fiscal 21 to fiscal 2022. It's broken down into two major categories. You'll see here the city department budgets, and then you'll see some other areas beneath that, which are responsible retirement benefits and interfund transfers. Some of the most notable amounts that have impacted the increase, I'll go through them in detail. The first area is the public works. As you see, public works has increased 234,000, or almost 3%. And the reason for that growth is primarily the solid waste professional services, otherwise known as the trash pickup, has escalated prices for the past year, probably attributable to COVID. And we do need to increase that budget 160,000 to offset some of those costs. There are also some other increases we need to add, some smaller amounts for natural gas and electricity costs increasing, as well as some needed building maintenance repairs. So we've increased that budget 25,000 as well. The next significant area of increase is the finance department of 219,000, or a little over 7%. The main reason for this growth is there was an approved IT system analyst position that was approved in the fiscal 2021 budget that was added into this year's budget. That represents 115,000 of the 219,000 increase. In addition, there are $66,000 of additional hardware, software, and communication increases that we have a very detailed analysis and spreadsheet for. And the Director of IT will be providing much more detail on this information when he meets with the council to discuss the IT budget. The next area of increase is in the Human Service and Senior Center area. This net increase of 108,000, 21%, is primarily the result of the new program or initiative to assist with the mental health issues in which presenting a challenge in the law enforcement area. More specifics with that program, that new program that the mayor mentioned, will be provided by Director Milstein at her meeting with the council. The most significant changes occurring in the general fund is the $517,000 increase in the interfund transfer account. The largest increase, as the mayor indicated earlier, is the contribution to the OPEB account. And I won't get into a great deal of detail in this, but I do want to mention that several years ago, we had a huge liability on the contributory pension obligation, and the city was not looked upon favorably because it had significant amounts that were owed, and we were not paying what's called the actuarial determined employer contribution amount. We slowly, over a 3 or 4 year period, ramped up that amount to the point where we are now funding that, both the Board of Ed, the city, and the water department areas. We are funding that at 100% what is required by the actuaries. That's had significant positive activity with bond holders and bond rating agencies. We now want to tackle the OPEB liability that the city has, and we're going to start that next year with the initial introduction of the $350,000, and hopefully over time we'll grow that to fully fund to the ADEC required for that liability that New London has on its books. The next area in that interfund transfers that I'll touch upon is the new hire request. The 4 new hire requests that we're proposing in the budget total $333,000. The first position to fund is an equity and inclusion officer. This position, as the mayor discussed, will be dedicated to establish the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The second position we'd like to fund is the Deputy Director / Training Officer within the Fire Department. This position has been vacant for many years, and due to the increased training requirements and ensuring the department is compliant with the new OSHA regulations, as well as the increasing needs regarding the implementation of the Regional Dispatch Center, we believe this is a proper time to put that forward in the general fund budget. We also are recommending 2 additional positions in the Recreation Department. They're proposed in the budget: the Recreation Program Manager and Recreation Department Supervisor. In the past, these positions have been funded in Camp New London in the special revenue account. However, over time, the Camp New London account has been diminished and it's nearly depleted. And instead of funding these in a special revenue account, we think it's more proper to fund these in the city's general fund. So we're making that recommendation as well. We are also increasing the contribution to Ocean Beach Park from $100,000 to $200,000 to provide funding for previous amounts owed, as well as the estimated additional amounts which will be owed as a result of COVID and the impact of the summer of 2020. We have also allocated $150,000 towards matching grants. As everyone knows, grants are critical and an integral part of advancing many of the initiatives, and the need to fund this is very important to us. Do want to mention that this does not eliminate the requirement to bring these grants to council for approval. That still will be necessary. This is simply to ensure the funding is available if the council approves the application of the grant. We also are allocating $156,000 towards police accountability measures that are going to be anticipated in the next fiscal year. These are a result of some of the unfunded mandates that have been pushed down to all local municipalities. And these will be used for drug testing, mental health testing, accreditation, as well as costs associated with the body cameras. I do want to make notion of one other thing. These amounts would have a substantial increase on the general fund if it wasn't for the ability of us to decrease the contribution to the debt service. We were able to save over $300,000 of debt service as a result of utilizing some of the bond debt reserve that we've received over the past few years, and we're able to reduce principal and interest payments next year. This is similar to what we did last year, utilizing some of the bond debt reserve to offset that. So in summary, the general fund appropriations have increased 2.63%, and the city departmental budgets are increasing 2.27% in the proposed budget. This slide provides the details relating to the Board of Ed submitted budget, the calculation which details how the taxpayer support is determined, and what and how the mayor's recommendation in the Board of Ed budget was determined. The green area to the left, I think you've seen in the past, provides the details which determines the total ECS payment New London will receive. This is an integral part of the Board of Ed budget, so I thought it would be useful to explain. The 28.6 million is the state ECS recommendation. 5.6 million is the state alliance grant, which goes to the Board of Ed. You arrive at the 22.9 million estimated city funding, and the 2% set aside of 458, which also goes directly to the Board of Ed. You subtract that from that to arrive at the fiscal 2022 revised state ECS support payment of 22,481,754. The red area in the middle provides details to the Board of Ed submitted budget and the resulting increase in taxpayer support. The Board of Ed request of $45,003,947 is a $982,000 increase from the fiscal 2021 budget, which represents a 2.2% increase in summary. However, when you factor in the ECS payment, you are more appropriately able to determine the true increase to the taxpayer support. When you reduce the ECS from the budgeted request, the taxpayer support request is $22,522,192. This amount is a $982,000 increase, which represents a 4.6% increase from the taxpayer support, which was provided in 2021. The blue area to the right provides the details to the mayor's recommended Board of Ed budget. The recommended budget increases the fiscal 21 budget from 44,021,759 by adding 484,650 to it for a total of 44,506,409. Once again, if you reduce the ECS payment of 22.4 million from this recommended budget, the resulting increase from the fiscal 2021 taxpayer support figure is 2.25%. This summary slide is an attempt to further explain the mayor's recommended budget with specific details relating to the additional costs to the taxpayer. The city department increases, which in effect need to be paid by the taxpayers, is 2.7%. Retirement benefits decreased 3.02%. The interfund transfers increased 4.8%. The resulting general fund increase is 2.63%. The mayor's recommended budget for the Board of Ed, after decreasing the amount by the state ECS, represents a 2.25% increase that will need to be paid by the taxpayers. In summary, the mayor's recommended budget attempts to provide all city departmental budgets, including the Board of Ed, with an average 2.26% increase in taxpayer support. This final slide provides the details as to how the tax warrant is determined, which ultimately determines the establishment of the mill rate. In order to come up, I guess you can't see that. The first order of business is to take the general fund and the Board of Education, add them together, and the total is almost $96.3 million. We then subtract out several tax revenues, non-tax revenues, $39.3 million. And we add in some additional amounts that are known of $182,000 to arrive at the 57.162, which is the tax warrant, 57,162,850. We then divide the tax warrant into the taxable grand list number, which you saw earlier, of the 1512763,748, to arrive at a formula-driven mill rate of 37.78. This mill rate assumes 100% collections. As a result, the final mill rate proposed for next year, including any changes, is 37.95%. This mill rate is slightly a decrease of 0.24 mils, or it equates to a 0.63% decrease. This concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you very much for your time and attendance.
This is President Dominguez. At this time, I want to thank Mayor Michael Passero and also Director McBride for this presentation for the annual budget for 2021-2022. And at this time, I'll ask President Pro Tem Nartatis to make a last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, it has been,
Counselor Booker, second.
thank you, Councilor Booker, for seconding. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, all right, the motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.